So you're a mountaineer and a gymnast all at the same time. That's
Not a
awesome.
gymnast, but but yoga has helped tremendously. I just have
Yeah.
to say that.
Welcome to the Greens and Blues 14er podcast. This episode, Zach crushes his gymnastics final. I take up gardening, and we sit down and talk with the wild wanderer, Laura Clark. Well, we are here with the wild wanderer, Laura Clark. Laura, thank you for joining the Greens and Blues podcast.
Oh, thank you guys for having me today. I'm excited to be here.
So, Laura, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you started getting into hiking in the first place?
Absolutely. Yeah. I have been hiking for as long as I can remember. My parents took me camping when I was a kid. I was in Girl Scouts, went hiking. One of the main thing that kind of sticks out with me is I went to a Girl Scout camp and we were given the opportunity to hike along the PCT, the Pacific Crest Trail in California. And there's some high points. They're not necessarily ranked, but there was a mountain up there called Pyramid and another one called Cone. And they could take a select amount of people to do it. And when I was younger, I always wanted to do it. I loved doing it. I loved the hike. Was through the California desert. It was hot. It was dusty. It was hard. I was always at the front of the line and I loved it. And I get to the summit and, that was it. That was it for me. Like I loved doing that. Girl Scouting really instilled that in me. And, bless those counselors who, put up with all these kids, making noise and singing songs on the trail and dusty and dirty and all that kind of stuff. But to me, that was amazing. It was an amazing experience. And I loved hiking ever since then. Ever since I was little, I hiked all through high school and getting older and having kids, I hiked with them, all that kind of stuff. It's never really left me.
Where are you originally from, Laura?
I'm from Southern California.
Okay.
So yeah, I lived there until 2007 and then I moved to Colorado.
So when you moved to Colorado, did you start hiking immediately? Where did you start becoming a hiker in Colorado?
I hiked locally. I did a lot of the easier trails, but I was busy. I was still in college and I was having kids and I was, being a mom and all that kind of stuff. I didn't really start hiking, I guess, mountaineering until 2014. And I didn't even really know what I was doing. So I had a group of Girl Scouts in high school that wanted to hike Pikes Peak. And as their leader, yeah, let's do that. Like, let's do it. We're going to make this happen. We're going to research. We're going to figure out how to make it happen. And we did that once. And I was like, oh, this is fun. I've been missing this.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I missed hiking. I've been hiking, but I missed aggressive hiking mountains.
Yeah.
I hadn't done it in, 10 to 15 years because I've been a mom and then started doing it. And it was amazing. Like I took the girls on the trip and we had some fun experiences, some insane experiences. And I was like, oh, I want to do this again. And I want to do this again and again and again. How can I find people to go with me? How can I do this? And that was in 2014. And we went, so then every summer we do mountains. And then I really didn't become what I would consider a mountaineer until 2017. That's when I learned what a 14er was. Like, I know a lot of people in Colorado know what a 14er is, but I had lived here for a good 10 years in Colorado before I knew what a 14er was. So that's when I really got into it.
In that last, say, 6.5 years, how many mountains above 13,000 feet have you climbed, hiked?
I've done over 600 peaks above 13,000 feet solo, but I've done more than that with friends and people that come or somebody that asks for help and wants somebody to go with them kind of thing. I'd say the number is probably close to 1,000.
So
then.
At least 100 unique summits a year on average since then.
Yeah, I average about 150 peaks a year. Yeah,
Wow.
usually.
Wow.
This year was a little low. I've been as high as 170. This year was low because we had a high winter and things didn't melt out. So not that I didn't go hiking, I just had a lot of failed attempts.
Yeah.
Getting up there. So
okay, so let's go backwards. So you mentioned your mom. You're doing all this hiking while being a parent. Talk for a minute about what that is for you. Like you're also a professional. You also have a job.
yes, yeah, I have a full-time job. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And so there's probably an adjacent question, which is, where do you manufacture time from? And can I have some of this? But um, how does being a mom and a mountaineer, how do those two things fit together in your head, in your life, in who you are?
Well, in the beginning, especially like I became a single mom obviously through a divorce, and it was a very nasty divorce, very, very nasty. And in order to not influence what my ex was doing with the kids, I would go hiking because I hike as far as I could. I couldn't have communication. He had his time with the kids. I couldn't interfere in that. And it helped me do that. And I started getting further and further and further along with that. In my professional career, I worked Monday through Thursday full time. And then I had Friday, Saturday, Sunday off. So on Fridays, I would drop my kids off for school and I'd climb a mountain and I'd be back before they got home. So I got really good at it. And especially as I got older, it was easier. So they could get themselves to school when they're in high school. They could get themselves to school. They were all driving, that kind of thing. I would start Pikes Peak at 3 a.m. and I'd be back home by 11:30. And then I'd be home in plenty of time to get them ready for their activities or to make dinner and all that kind of stuff. Like I just fit it into my lifestyle. But it was also me time. I was a better mom because I went hiking. I could go through what was going on in my head and go, okay, this is the right way to answer this question. My kid's going through this, or I'm going through this in a divorce. How do I handle it so that the kids are positively impacted, not negatively impacted? Or I'm going through something at work. How do I address this situation at work? And hiking, especially hiking solo, gave me that time, several hours at a time. Sometimes with Pikes Peak, I mean, it would take me 7.5 hours to do that one. The bar trail one, it would, we got pretty good at it, but it gave me 7.5 hours to think about a situation and really, really think about just like, all the things in my head. And I can go through the negative stuff and go, no, that's not right. But I process the negative stuff and then I can come back going, no, this is the right way to deal with it. And I was always happier. I felt clarity when I was done. And I feel that because I was able to start out at least doing it on Fridays when my kids were in school, it wasn't really impacting them at all. I was, home when they were home, which was important.
It sounds like hiking was healing for you in many ways.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I've been a hiker all my life and it is healing. I can remember being 10 years old, sitting by a creek by the tree, just writing things in a journal and just feeling so at peace, hiking 3 or 4 miles to get to that place and just loving nature, absolutely loving it and feeling at home.
So how many times have you summited Pikes?
I've lost count. I think I know the first time I learned what a 14er was, I had hiked Pikes Peak 26 times. And on my way down, I met somebody going up and they're like, oh, so how many 14ers have you done? And my answer was, what's a 14er? Like I didn't even know. It was just, I just did it all the time. I did it, every Friday. I did it every Friday kind of thing. And I did that for a while. So I've lost count at this point, how many times I've done it. And it's popular. So when people say, hey, would you take me on this? It's like, absolutely,
Yeah.
What you want to take, let's go.
I know the way.
I know it well. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been up and down that trail.
Right. Yeah.
It also seems like it seems like you're driven, and this taps into that sense of drive. I don't know if I want to use the word ambitious, but not many people get up at 3 a.m. to go hike Pikes Peak and make sure they're back by 11 to get their kids to activities, right? Like most people are sleeping in. So where does that come from?
I don't know where it comes from, but I can say a lot of mountaineers have the same mentality. We'll get together at happy hours, we'll meet each other, and it's just like, oh yeah, we're all spreadsheet people, we're all type A, we all know weather, that's what we do all day long. We look at weather, we look at the mountains, we look at who's done what, we look at the, how far it is a drive from the house and what time I need to start. And we just tend to be type A people that are on top of that. I don't know where it comes from, but I know that we're all pretty similar in that. I've met very few mountaineers that are just like, yeah, I just decided to go out. Like most of us have binders full of things that are just like, how, who, what, where, how. Like I know I have 100 and something 13ers left, and I have every route already put in a book in sections with which range it's in and how long it'll take me to drive there and which trailheads are near there and 4 or 5 different ways to ascend, to look at the weather and go, that's what I'm doing that day. Like I don't know where it comes from. That's just who we are. Like we're just focused on it.
Yeah.
So the 13ers you have left, you're already ready to go on them. You just need to do them, right? You've got your research
Yeah.
done and everything. Just,
I'll show you guys this. This is my book, my
oh,
binder.
look at that.
And here is every single, I put together from Cal Topo every single, I don't know if you can see that, but
Yeah.
topo
Yeah.
maps for every single thing I need left to do for the 13ers. So it's just, what's the weather look like? Like, where's the weather good? And that's where I'm headed. And I pull it up and I follow my topo map and make it happen.
That's
So,
awesome. Oh my gosh.
so how much time would you say you spend preparing for those? That was a question both Eric and I were talking about. Like, we're going to talk about your trip reports in a little bit, but like, what's the amount of time that you spend doing beta for these, like researching routes? And it seems like it's more than just hiking for you. It's a total undertaking, right?
I'm not just looking at routes, I'm looking at best route to do it. Because when I do trip reports, I don't want people to go the hardest way. And I don't want to go the hardest way. I want to find the easiest way up. So usually what I do is wintertime when we have really high avalanche danger, or like right now we're on a winter storm watch and they're calling for 24 inches where I live
Yep.
tonight. And I can't go hiking. On the days I can't go hiking, it's cathartic to, okay, time to plan where I can go this summer and get it done. So a lot of my winter is spent putting together potential routes, and a lot of them. I never just have one, because when you get there, I've had several times where, it's, oh, I didn't know that was private property, or gates are locked, or you can't get there because there's too much snow or whatever. So I put together several different ways to get in, and that's how I keep myself calm in the winter when sometimes I can't get out. It's just, okay, it's a bad snow day. Guess what I'm doing today? But hour-wise, kind of doing it, probably maybe an hour per peak, maybe. The harder ones, the ones that are really far out there that have a really long approach, I'll spend a lot more time doing research. But especially now, I know where a lot of the trailheads are. I know how to get there. I know what it looks like around there, that kind of thing. It's a little less. But the ones, especially in the San Juan, that require a lot of commitment, I do a whole lot more research, especially after, I think it was 2018, 2019, when there were the fires out there. And you're so far in. And I know I took the train in, but I was lucky that I got the train in because there were fires going on all over the place. And I made the first train in and I said, well, what happens if they reignite because it's not completely out yet and I can't get out? And he's like, well, you just got to figure that out. Like, we're not coming in to get you.
Have you,
So
have
I was
you
like,
heard of
okay.
hiking to Vallecito Lake?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And that was it. I was like, okay, so I need to have multiple exit points too. I just can't be okay knowing I can get there. What if something like that happens? And in Colorado, that happens. We do have wildfires and okay, I need an exit route and I need to know it's a viable exit route. So yeah, I do a lot of research on that. But once you get there, like I like to say at this point, you could drop me off anywhere in the state and I can find my way home. I've been all over the mountains, so I know how to get back.
Except for the Great Plains, right? That's a whole other
bowl. Yeah, that's totally different. That's a whole nother conversation. I'm not bad with the Great Plains, but yeah, mountain ranges, yeah.
So for those that don't know Laura, what Laura's probably best known for is doing pretty much all of these hundreds of peaks solo. As someone who's, I haven't done a fraction. I mean, I've hiked more 100 and something 13ers solo myself, but why do you hike solo? I think you may have been kind of touching up against that earlier. You're pretty well known for that, and your trip reports kind of showcase perhaps the benefits and the perils of solo hiking. So what is it about solo hiking that draws you so much?
Well, hiking to me is serenity, and it's being out there and just enjoying nature. So in the beginning, I didn't start out trying to hike solo. Like that wasn't a goal of mine at all. I was doing stuff and I would have people that would sign up to go with me. And then last minute they would bail or not be able to go because something happened and I wouldn't go. And then I got kind of upset about that because like I still wanted to go. I could go, but my friends, something would come up. Their kid would get sick or they get called into work or something. And it was all very valid, or maybe sometimes it was too hard for them. And I found that when I was on hikes, I ended up being the leader anyway. I mean, I have wilderness survival first aid. I've taught first aid and outdoor survival skills for years. So I was always the most in charge when I went. And I'm like, I'm educated. I can do this. I might as well just go by myself. And it was so much nicer. I'm not the kind of hiker that needs to take breaks. But when you're with somebody, you take breaks for them. You take snack breaks, you take water breaks. And that's a very fair thing to do. Like you're a team, you're doing that. But that's not how I hike. I can just power through. Like I don't need those things. And I found when I went by myself, I was happier. Like I was just,
Yeah.
I could be more in my head. I didn't have to worry about somebody else. I knew that if somebody was hurt, I'd be the one doing triage anyway. Like I just kind of knew that. So yeah, that was it. And then I just found so much peace doing it by myself. It gave me time to reflect and think. I don't mind going with other people. I do. And I do, probably 30 peaks a year, if not more, with other people. But I'm so much happier going just by myself, especially if it's new. I like to figure it out and I like to figure it out on my own. It's like a puzzle. I figured out how to get up there on my own, and that's kind of what I'm excited about.
Hmm.
And once I figured it out, I'll take other people up there and I'm like, oh, don't go that way. No, you want to do this instead. Like, that's how I did it the first time. Wouldn't necessarily do it that way. Let's make it easy on you. I'd much rather be a mentor when I go with other people. And that's made easier if I've already done it by myself.
So let's talk about your hiking. So what are some of the perils of hiking solo? If you want to sprinkle in some stories here. Hiking alone gives you serenity. It also means that sometimes we're out on our own, right? What are some of the challenges you faced as a solo hiker?
Well, I don't really know if they're challenges. I see them more as opportunities to solve a problem. Like that's what they say. Like, a challenge or a difficult situation is just an opportunity to figure it out, to solve the problem, to be a good person and whatever it is. But I would say like being the decision maker. Do I want to stop here? What's the weather look like? Is this safe? Should I cross here? Should I look further? Should I not? Should I come back? Should I turn around? That's a big one. And those are challenges, but I like that kind of stuff. I like being the one that gets to make that decision. And when you're solo, you make it. Like that's it. You make it. That's your decision. And I can tell you, I've turned back from hundreds of peaks. I can just say, like thinking back because I didn't feel safe. This isn't it. I don't feel safe. I think there's too much threat of lightning. I can feel my hair standing on end. Nope, I'm turning back. And there's nobody to say, no, we should keep going. It's me going, nope, we should turn back. Or, you know what? I don't think I can climb that. That's not something I think I can climb. I'm going to go back and I'm going to go to the climbing gym and I'm going to figure it out and I'm going to come back and do it again. Now, if I had a partner, maybe we could have done something like cheerleaders where, you stand on somebody's knees and you pull somebody up and then push them up or whatever. And that's kind of a drawback is you don't have someone to help you with that. You got to completely figure it out on your own. But that's a challenge I enjoy. I enjoy doing that and hopefully making the right decisions. I am actually risk averse. So I can tell you I turn back way more than you would think I do. So even though I summit a lot of peaks, I had a lot of failed attempts where I'm just like, nope, doesn't feel safe. Not doing it. Turn around, going back. Mountain will still be there.
Yeah, reading your book, risk averse is not a phrase that comes into my head, right?
I am because because especially when I was going through it in the beginning, I was a single mom to these kids and I wasn't just a single mom, I was their mom. Like
and you're their sole provider and
I was the sole everything. So something couldn't happen to me. I had to make it back alive. I had to make good decisions and I had to make sure I was going to make it back alive. And I had to go, am I going to be able to do this? Is this something I can do? And sometimes I got stuck in situations where it was scary and I'm like, okay, I got to go forward. How can I do this as safely as possible? Because I have to come home to my kids. I had to. There was no other option. I couldn't not come home to them.
In your book, your description of your descent off Broken Hand Pass with the slushy snow the first time you did it, I was like, that doesn't feel right. And I know your descent of the Hourglass on Little Bear. And both of those were like, you even said, man, this is scary to me. But again, you push through it. And
it's remaining calm. Absolutely. And I knew I had the skills to do it. I just had to put my mindset where it wouldn't freak out. It was keeping my mind like, you know what, other people do this. I know it's doable. I know how to do it. I just have to actually do it and focus on what I'm doing right now to stay safe. And in fact, in the Little Bear situation, it wasn't me I was scared about. It was the other people that didn't know what they were doing. Like they were the ones that were causing me more stress than anything. Just I can't control their behavior, which is another reason to go solo. Like I can control my behavior. I know what I'm doing. And with the Broken Hand Pass, I was totally prepared to stay overnight. I mean, totally prepared. I only kept going because I knew I was okay. But I was willing to sit there and wait overnight for things to freeze up again and then do it again. It was just, I think I got this. And if I ever don't, I'm just going to stop right here and we'll try again in 12 hours. That's it.
Most of us lack that maturity, right? Be able to say, I think I can do this. And if I can't, I'm willing to face the consequences of waiting it out for the night. And
we should all be prepared for that, right? Like, the 10 essentials, we should all be ready to spend the night if we have to. And somebody knows where we're at. And if I don't call you by this time, then worry about me, all that kind of stuff. And I had that in place when I was doing those. So
I've been following your trip reports for a number of years because they're incredibly detailed. They're super helpful, especially for someone like me who hikes alone and does 13ers that don't have designated trails or routes up them. You're like showing me the way. And oftentimes I find that I will look at the map and I'll be like, I think that ridge will go. And then I'll go look at your trip report and it'll go. But as I watched your trip reports evolve over the years, you moved from a hiker and sometimes occasional climber to someone who was comfortable with climbing routes. And I'm wondering how that transition occurred. And I'm thinking in particular of, I think it was your trip report for Red Cliff and Coxcomb, where you roped in for part of it. And I just remember thinking, she's solo roping on these.
Yeah. Yep.
And I thought, that's something I would not do solo, but the fact that you can do that speaks a lot of you. So how did that evolution occur, and are you comfortable? Where are you at with all that?
yeah, well, I couldn't do it in the beginning, but I knew
That's
that if I
right.
wanted to keep doing peaks, I'd have to figure that out. So for me at the time, my son was an Eagle Scout and he had Boy Scout meetings in downtown Colorado Springs next to a climbing gym. And while he was old enough to drive, I still wanted to be an involved parent. So I was still a merit badge counselor and I still went with him to meetings, but he wanted his alone time too. So I joined the climbing gym. And for the first hour that he was at his meeting, I would go climb and I would work on the skills that I would need, like work on them, work on them, work on them. I'd come back, I'd have chalk all over me. I'd be, in workout clothes and I'd be a volunteer and I'd help these boys with their merit badges and stuff. And, I felt like I could still be an involved parent, but still do something that was for me, that was, helping me do something else that I wanted to do, transitioning from mom to mountaineer. You never really are never a parent. You're always a parent. But I knew that my kids were growing up and going to college. And that means that they're no longer living at home and I'd need to have something that fulfilled me. And some of these peaks were hard. And I didn't think I could do them without knowing how to do ropes. So I went to the climbing gym. I made friends. I asked people to take me out, show me how to do stuff, help belay me, let me belay you, show me how to set up anchors and that kind of stuff. And I met a lot of people that were more than willing to help me do that. And I'm very, very thankful for them for taking me out, taking me under their wing and showing me these kinds of things. And then after they taught me, I go by myself. I go someplace easy. We have Red Rock Canyon here in Colorado Springs where, there's some places that you can fall far, but others that, you got a 20-foot rappel and that's not too bad. So I would set stuff up and try it and practice and practice and practice and then bring it out into the field. And I have to say, especially with Coxcomb and Red Cliff, I attempted that more than once. I got up there the first time and I couldn't do it. The ropes I had were way too heavy for me. They were the right size, but way too heavy. I'm not a big person and the ropes weighed just as much as I did. It felt like I couldn't, I was off balance. And then I'm like, okay, this isn't working. Like I attempted it and I got pretty close and I'm like, this isn't working. So then I went back to the climbing gym and put my ropes in my backpack and practiced climbing with the ropes in my backpack and being at difficult angles and all that kind of stuff and was able to make it up. It was extremely committing to rappel 175 feet down by myself when I don't consider myself a rock climber. I mean, I don't. It was an ends to a means kind of thing, like learning how to do it. But I had a really good friend, Tim Stitch. He helped me out with a lot of stuff. And before I went, he gave me a checklist. And he goes, keep this in your backpack and just look at it every time because you're going to be nervous when you're doing it. And this isn't something you do every day. These are all the things you want to make sure are done before you take that rappel. And I can't thank him enough for that. Like, I mean, I take it out every time, even though I've done it over and over again. You make one mistake, you're dead. Yeah. So every time I go out, I pull out that checklist he gave me. It's like, did I do this? Did I tie this securely? Did I do this? Am I roped in here? And then I do it. The friends help me get that down.
Shout out to Tim.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
This might be a good spot to plug your book, Laura, Soloing Colorado's Bicentennials, in which you share a whole bunch of stories about soloing 13ers and 14ers. And I think the next few questions I've got kind of come from stories from that book. One of the things that stood out to me was one of your trips to Snowmass and how at one point you actually fell into Snowmass Lake. And as I'm reading, I'm like, oh my gosh, what in the world is happening here? So can you kind of walk us through that particular scenario and how you got yourself out of there?
I was still really new in hiking. Like I did all the 14ers in 13 months. So I did them all pretty quick and didn't know what I didn't know. And that's terrible. I learned the hard way by trial and error. And I had heard that the best time to do snowmass was when there's snow in the mass, right? So as soon as I figured out that somebody had done it, I was like, I'm going to do it. It was hard getting up there, going through the log jam and then going up to the summit and then coming back down. There was no trail. So somebody had said they had done it, and I totally believe they did it, but the wind blew in tracks and I had to make tracks all on my own. And as I'm coming down, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to be nice and I'm going to try to make a good trench for whoever wants to come next. Because I was kind of expecting a trench and there was no trench. So I'm trenching along the side of the lake and the snow cleaves and I fall into the lake. But it was all in slow motion, very slow motion. Like I felt it happening and I could have sworn it took 30 seconds before I hit that water. Now I know it was probably a second or two, but it was all in my head in slow motion. And I've been teaching outdoor survival skills for years. And in my head, I'm like, okay, when you hit that water, you're going to go into shock. It's going to be cold. You need to do this. Like all this stuff went through my head when that happened. So when I hit the water, I sprung right up and got out. Now, I was wearing snowshoes when I hit the water, so I couldn't move very well. Like, I was flopping around all over the place, but I'm like, you got to get out of here. You got to get out of here. And then knowing, okay, there's snow everywhere, obviously. The best thing to do to get the water off me, since I don't have a towel or anything, is to roll in the snow. And the snow absorbs the water and dries me off and all that kind of stuff. And knowing in my head the next right thing to do is to start a fire. But looking around and going, okay, that's not going to work. I have Raynaud's, which means I get cold very, very fast. It's like rapid onset frostbite. Mm-hmm. I mean, it can be 75 degrees and I'll get cold and I'll lose all dexterity in my fingers. It's insane. But I knew that if I took the time to start a fire, that I was going to have hypothermia. It was not going to be good. So it was just, okay, the next best thing is to hike out of here. That's going to keep me warm, right? Like, hiking is going to keep me warm. My car is 8 miles away. I've already made a trail in. I'm just going to keep going and making out. But I think I was able to keep a clear head because of all the training I've had. And not just the training I've had, but I've taught it to other people. So it was like I knew exactly what to do. I had been through the scenario in my head several times. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is actually happening. Okay, this is what we do. And that's it. And I knew I had a nice warm pair of socks and extra clothes in the car. So I could sleep overnight in my wet clothes by a fire, or I could make it back out to my truck where I knew I'd be warm. That's it.
Wow.
What was that 8 mile hike back to your truck like? Were you just like counting the seconds, and was that just crazy, or were you just motivated to say, hey, I need to do this. I know I need to do this. I need to get back.
Oh, I was motivated to get back, but I also realized that I was in shock. I knew I was in shock. I was hearing voices. I was hearing like I could hear the radio playing, but there was no radio playing. Like I knew I was having auditory hallucinations. I could tell that. But I knew that's what they were. So I just kind of enjoyed them. I'm like, okay, I know this isn't real, but it sounds like there's a 50 song playing on the radio. So I'm just going to go with it and I'm going to make my way down. And the further down I got out of the snow and, there were wildflowers and it was a total different topography and everything. I felt much safer when I made it back over the log jam and the snow stopped. And I was just like, okay, now I'm on a trail. I can see the trail. I just need to get back to the truck. That's it. I just need to keep moving. When you have Raynaud's, there's no stopping. You have to keep moving or you're going to get frostbite. You're going to get hypothermia. So it was just, nope, I know where the truck is. Stay on the trail. Let's go.
Wow. When it comes to when you were hiking Castle and Conundrum, and I asked this because Zach and I hiked a Castle and Conundrum, I think a couple of years ago now.
Yeah.
So you mentioned glissading down the gully that's in the saddle between the two. And
Yes.
So Zach and I noticed that and thought, that would be kind of fun. Boy, that looks steep. And man, the tiny little trail from the saddle down to where you would start glissading, that sure looks pretty steep too. So can you describe that experience and like how fast were you going down that? Because that did not look very slow.
Okay, I'm going to say once again at this point, especially with the 14ers, I didn't know what I didn't know. So I took what I learned online and just went, oh, they did it. I can do this too.
Yeah.
That was pretty much my mentality.
Yep.
So I wouldn't recommend glissading down that at all in any way, shape, or form. But I could tell that somebody had. And I'm like, well, that's the way to get down. So I'm going to do it. In the beginning, it was really, really slow because I was scared. And I can tell you that first drop off, it was probably too late in the season to glissade anyway. It realistically probably was. I should have done it earlier, but I could see where other people had slid. So I'm like, well, this is the way we go down. This is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to take it slow. And I did. I took it really, really slow. I didn't really glissade down. I more
Butt
kind of
scooted.
scooted down.
Butt scooted
and stopped myself. Yeah. And stopped and stopped and stopped and stopped and stopped.
Mm-hmm.
And I get down to the little pond at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh, that is so cool. I got to get a picture of that. And I go in my pocket for my camera. I'm like, oh my gosh, I lost my camera. Where is my camera? So I had to hike back up to get, it was on my phone. I had to hike back up almost to where I started to get my phone because I knew I lost it. So a couple hundred, maybe 600 feet up, I had to go back up. And then I'm kicking in steps doing that, obviously, to get my phone. And then the second time I'd already made a slide path because I'd already gone down. So the second time I went down, it was much faster because it was nice and smooth. And it wasn't that hard to self-arrest. I can't tell you how fast I was going. I can tell you I was pretty cautious and stopping myself as often as possible because
and holding onto your phone.
I didn't know what I was doing. And and took some pictures, some videos with my phone. Okay, I'm going to stop here, get some pictures. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend that. But I learned from that. And then I practiced glissading later. I'm just like, okay, this is something I should learn. I didn't realize it was going to be like this. Let's learn in a safe environment. And I think in that trip report, I think that's a class 2 hike. And I'm like, this is not class 2 when you're glissading down. You need a helmet. Like nobody told me to bring a helmet. Nobody told me because I didn't ask them, but also none of the trip reports I saw said to bring a helmet. No, you need a helmet. You need an ice axe. And I was clueless at that point. I was still new. I didn't know what I didn't know. So
yeah.
Did you use your garden claw to help self-arrest on that glissade? I know that that's a completely different hike, but
that's a totally different story. I've only used that once. Yeah, only used that once, but no. And I actually used that to ascend, not to glissade. That was more of I needed 2 points of contact that weren't my hands.
And you had one ice axe at the time, so
I had one ice axe. Yeah, that was another last minute decision. Yeah, yeah. And I don't recommend that either. Although I have to say it worked really, really well. It worked better than my ice axe. The 3-prong garden tool really did. I got a lot of flack for that, which is okay. That's totally okay. It's not,
No, it's not okay. If it worked, it's fine.
It did. It worked really well. And as I did more research, that's how, but ice axes have only been around for 100 maybe years, maybe a little more than that, but maybe I think the 1920s they started coming out, but they were using garden hose to ascend before that. They're like, oh, this works, before they actually perfected an ice axe. And it did. The 3-prong one worked great. Saying that, you should have the proper tools to do it. You shouldn't just go out there with whatever you have. I was being opportunistic, I guess. And I guess I was trying to be overly prepared. I didn't realize I should need to until the day before. And I was just looking for a last minute, what can I do? And I was totally prepared to turn back if it didn't work. With the weather window and everything, saw an opportunity and went, there's no way I can get an ice axe in 10 hours. Everything's closed. It is now 5 o'clock at night. I'm not going to get one.
Yep.
Well, I'm going to try. And if it doesn't work, I'll come back. So a lot of the trip reports where I do something that looks a little risque.
Unorthodox.
Unorthodox, that's, not necessarily on purpose. I plan on going back if I don't make it. I'm fact finding. Am I going to be able to do this or not? I turn back so often because it's not safe. In that instance, I was prepared to turn back and I'm like, oh, this actually works. So I'm going to use it. But I was totally prepared to turn back if it didn't. It just happened to work for me.
Yeah. This one fascinates me. So in your description of jagged, you mentioned that you get to a chimney and you mentioned that you used a technique that you used when you were younger on some parallel bars. And as I'm reading this, you're using this technique to get up the chimney. And as I'm reading, I'm thinking, did she do like a backflip up this chimney or like a side flip? It was intriguing how you were describing getting up this chimney by yourself. And I just wanted to ask, I guess in more detail, how did you get up that? Because that chimney was not short. It looked like it was, I don't know, from the pictures I saw, 20, 30 feet plus. And I just couldn't figure out how exactly you made your way up there.
Yeah, well, there's a standard way to do it. I just wasn't able to do it. I'm actually short. So I found that a lot of trip reports, not all of them, but a lot of them are written by men who are taller. They have longer arms, they have longer legs, longer torsos. It's easier for them to do stuff. And I knew the correct way to do it. I just wasn't tall enough to do it. I couldn't reach where I needed to go. I could see where I needed to go, but it just wasn't happening. So yeah, about 20 feet up, there was a recent rock fall in the past, I'm going to say 5 years. I could be wrong on that number, but kind of blocked the chimney. So you should have just been able to go straight up it, but rockfall put a rock at the top of the chimney, so you had to get around this like 5 foot rock. And I tried for a very long time to get up and around this thing. I had my rock climbing shoes on. I'm moving around. I know where I need to step. I know what I need to do, but I can't actually physically get the moves in that I need to do. And I wasn't really willing to give up yet. So I found a way to secure my hands under the rock and then kick my feet up and kind of go do a somersault backwards up and over the rock to get me over it. And the only reason I did that was because I had attached the rope to myself so that I knew that when I was at the top, I could secure an anchor to get back down. There was no way I was getting down without a rope. Like I absolutely knew that. But I had the rope secured to me and I had the webbing secured to me. So dropped my gear, kept that stuff with me, and backwards somersault to get up it. And that's not the traditional way to do it. And most people don't have to do that. That was how I problem solved it and made it happen.
So you're a mountaineer and a gymnast all at the same time. That's
not
awesome.
A gymnast, but yoga has helped tremendously. I just have to say that yoga has helped tremendously with hiking, but no.
That's awesome. Wow. One other thing that I noticed, and you mentioned this multiple times, where you would finish a hike, and when you get back to camp or your truck, you would have something to eat and kind of do some things to kind of wrap up from what you had just done. But you also mentioned rebraiding your hair, and I thought that was really insightful. It made me wonder, okay, is this like, would your hair get tangled on the rocks at all? Would you have to rebraid it, or was it more of like a decompression therapeutic thing after such a strenuous day? And each time I read that, I thought, oh, that's really cool. Why would you rebraid your hair each time?
Oh, my hair's a mess. Yeah, absolutely. It's windy when you're above tree line. You're wearing a helmet or a hat or a beanie or something. And no, my hair is all over the place. And if I don't rebraid it, I'm gonna have knots. That's just it. I learned, I think like the second or third peak I did was Democrat and did, the loop up there. And it was windy and I didn't have my hair tied back correctly. And the knots, I probably pulled out half my hair just trying to brush it out. And so now I braid it every time and it still comes back a mess. It's still a rat's nest. And if I try to sleep without fixing it, it's going to be even worse. So yeah, no, I guess that's self-care, maybe a little bit, like just cleaning up before I go to bed so that the next morning it's not so bad. Yeah, no, I look pretty ragged when I get back from a lot of my hikes.
Don't we all?
I have a question about raggedness here. One thing I observe in both your book and in your trip reports, you start way earlier than anyone I've ever met for your hikes. And it's obviously worked because you have hiked a ton and successfully climbed a ton of mountains. I notice a lot of 3 a.m. starts for you. I have two questions that go with this. One is this kind of like a why. And then the second one is, what's the weirdest thing you've ever seen before sunrise?
Okay, so the why is dependent on the weather. So I like to guarantee as much success as possible. And a lot of what I do, I don't know that there's going to be success. So there's going to be some problem solving, some figuring out a route for a lot of stuff. And in the summer, you've got the afternoon thunderstorms. So you want to be down tree line before noon. And then in the winter, when it warms up in spring, you've got avalanches and other things that can happen, post holing or soft snow, and you can't get out. So I like to start early just to kind of pad my chances of success. That's pretty much it. I'd much rather be done early and succeed than start late and not have enough time, because I feel like I'm doing a lot of problem solving. I'd like to have the time to figure it out where I'm not worried, oh my gosh, the clouds are forming, the clouds are forming, the clouds are forming. I'd rather have figured it out before then and make it back down. In the beginning, that started more as, okay, my kids can get themselves to school. I want to be home before school is over. And so what do I need to do to ensure that, when they get home, I am home and I am there and doing stuff for them. And I just kind of kept that. It's worked. It's been a good rule of thumb. It's worked. I've gotten into situations where, I'm so glad, I had more time to figure this out, kind of thing. Nothing wrong with starting later. I know a lot of people that like to start as soon as they don't need a headlamp. And as far as I know, they've been successful every time. There's nothing wrong with that. This works for me, starting early and getting it done I feel good getting it done. Like just like, yeah, I did that. Boom. Okay. I'm done.
It just means you're off and running on little sleep, it seems like. Every time I read a trip report of yours, I'm like, when does she sleep?
Yeah, you know what? Okay, so when I get back from the trailhead, I'm usually back by around noon or 2. I'll spend 2 to 3 hours to write a trip report, and I'm usually in bed by 6,
Okay.
realistically. So, like, because I sleep out of my truck and I go trailhead to trailhead, so I get an early night's sleep. Realistically, that's easier. I haven't really seen many scary things on the trail early in the morning.
You've seen some moose, I know.
I've seen, yeah, but I mean, like in the dark, I'm trying to think of like in the dark, what was scary. The one thing that probably scared me the most was a beaver, just because I didn't know what it was. And I probably should have known, but it looked like a manatee. This thing was huge. I thought beavers were like 3 feet long, and I could have sworn this thing was 5 feet long. Now, just realistically,
maybe it wasn't a beaver, Laura. Maybe
it was definitely a beaver, but like it was just like it took me a second to realize that, and it scared me. When I saw it at first, I thought it was a baby bear. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, a baby bear. Where's mama? Like, I'm looking around. That's why it scared me. Like, where's mama bear? I'm seeing a baby. And then it went onto the trail and I could tell that it was a beaver. And then I just kind of walked behind it while it waddled in front of me. And then it jumped into the river on the side. I hear animals at night. Like I hear them running away from me, but I don't see a lot of them. And you can tell what things are when you hear them. You know, if it's a rabbit versus a deer versus, a moose, you can tell the more you go out what it is, or a bear. Bears are clumsy. They make so much noise. I mean, they make so much noise. If something's making a lot of noise, it's a bear and it's running away from you. You just kind of get used to it.
We'll continue our conversation with Laura Clark on the next episode of the Greens and Blues 14er podcast. In the meantime, if you want to reach out to us, feel free to send us an email at greensandbluespodcast@gmail.com or look us up on our Facebook group. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.